My name is Tony Wilson. I make YouTube videos on a channel called Framework. I like to cover scary games every October. It's a tradition. To my shame, I'd never played Alan Wake, but the time had come. As I explored Bright Falls and experienced Wake's nightmare, I began to have one of my own. You see, while there are many different interpretations of this tale, I kept projecting my own work onto Wake's experience. This is what I learned. Before I can talk about what Alan Wake means to me, we have to talk about what the game, well, is. First released in 2010, then remastered in 2021, Alan Wake is the story of the titular author, who's come to the town of Bright Falls to try to break his writer's block. Fans are anxiously awaiting his next crime novel, and a vacation just might do the trick. Unfortunately, this one quickly turns into a nightmare. There's debate over whether Alan Wake is actually a horror game or just a psychological thriller. One thing's for sure, it's definitely meta. Wake begins finding scattered pages of a mysterious manuscript. He's named as the author, but he has no memory of writing it. Weirder still, the words on the page foreshadow the bizarre events that start happening in Bright Falls. Television sets alternate between a voyeuristic view of Wake at his typewriter and episodes of Night Springs, a Twilight Zone stand-in for which he has written a few episodes. Things got even more meta when the game first came to PC, thanks to these new QR codes that brought the strangeness of the game world into our own. So how do we begin putting all these pieces together? Well, actually, the game does basically explain everything by the end, more or less, but that's not really the point here. Right from the start, a quote from the legendary Stephen King, as read by Wake, tells you that trying to figure out what everything means might actually ruin the experience.
In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end.
So I'm not here to do that. When I covered Control, another great Remedy entertainment game, I talked about the joy of embracing the mystery. This isn't an explainer video, it's an interpretation. You see, as a person who makes videos on the internet, I feel a lot like Wake. If you're a creative type, then you're a lot like him too, and you probably view the game as straight horror, just like I do. When it comes to content creation, there's a strong fear of letting your audience down, and a massive amount of pressure to deliver.
I thought maybe you could write here that a change of scenery would get you past—
Damn it, Alice, everyone keeps—
Hey, just hear me out.
Wake's wife, Alice, thinks that a change of scenery is just what he needs to get the next book done. That and a session with renowned psychiatrist Dr. Emil Hartman. When it comes to writer's block, all possible solutions should be on the table. If your art form doesn't involve writing, you're still included here. Just imagine your particular craft every time I talk about writing specifically. Call it creator's block if you want. You could even call it the creator's dilemma, just like Hartman does. As much as I hate the term content, it is a good catch-all for different kinds of creative works, be they writing, painting, music, or anything in between. Not living up to the potential of those works is a scary thing for creative types. That's a big part of what makes writer's block so frustrating, even terrifying at times. Speaking from my own experience, I feel pressure to make sure all of my videos meet a certain level of quality. I hope that my talking points can be informative or enlightening at best, but also just worth your time at a bare minimum. If I'm lucky, it feels more like I'm plucking the idea out of the ether as opposed to having to sit down and really brainstorm. When the scripts practically write themselves like that, it's the best. My man Alan definitely knows what that's like.
A story is not a machine that does what you tell it. A story is a beast with a life of its own.
Other times, it's not so easy. And that's when another feeling starts to creep in. Imposter syndrome. You don't even need to be a creative type to understand this one, but if you're fortunate enough to have never felt that way, Alan Wake demonstrates it well, at the very beginning of the game. The tutorial drops players right into the dark, alternate world enveloping Bright Falls, where they square off against an axe-wielding hitchhiker.
It's not like your story's already good. Not like they have any artistic merit. You're a lousy writer.
Those cutting words are exactly what it feels like when imposter syndrome sets in. It's a feeling of being attacked by your own work, as if you're not good enough for the thing you yourself are making. In Wake's case, it's a literal attack. Video games are an interactive medium, which means Remedy had to find some way to gamify this internal conflict. Part of me wonders if the developers felt the same thing to a degree. The Max Payne games are what put them on the map, but Alan Wake ushered in a new, ambitious era for the studio. One rooted in the tradition of experimental world design, deeply layered narrative themes, and well-crafted characters.
Yeah, sounds like you've got a lazy bastard for a husband.
Yeah, but I got a thing for him.
Alan's wife Alice is central to the story. Internally, Alan has to endure the psychological effects of an unfinished work. But externally, he has to rescue his wife from the depths of Cauldron Lake. Complaints about her being fridged, as the trope goes, are valid, but at the same time, I see her as a metaphor for so much more. You see, writer's block isn't just a temporary lapse in creativity or an inability to fulfill your goal. It can also be a social hindrance. Alan Wake may be a game about darkness, but it's clear as day that Alan and Alice's relationship has become strained during this difficult time. The inability to get a new novel done has left Wake short-tempered, causing him to snap at her. Rescuing her isn't just about physically pulling her up out of the lake. It also represents repairing their relationship and growing close again. These social strains don't just taint people, but places too. One of the most clever things about the game is how you'll revisit areas in a different light. Literally. Your first stop at the ranger station, during the daytime, involves helping Park Ranger Rusty patch up his dog Max. When you return at night, Max is in a cage, and the entire station has been violently torn apart. It's an awful, twisted version of a familiar location, a result of Wake in his manuscript. It's sad, but a creative drive can cause these same issues between people and places in our world too. I'm grateful to have never had any major conflict along those lines in my life, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't bring my laptop on some vacations or dip out of a social gathering early in order to finish up an edit. When everyday things get overshadowed by an insatiable need to work on your art, it's a problem. One of Alan Wake's greatest strengths is the ability to take what is common and twist it into something dangerous. That's the whole deal with the poltergeist objects. On the bright side, social interaction can also be a boost for creativity. On the most basic level, breaks are important, but to link it back to Alan Wake, I'm pleased with the number of interviews and collaborations I've been able to organize on this channel. I've also had a handful of friends help me out behind the scenes when the job calls for an extra hand. The game has its own version of this, as Wake isn't always facing off against the darkness alone. His agent Barry Wheeler and Sheriff Sarah Breaker join up for a few fights through the streets of Bright Falls. Wake interacts with quite a lot of people in Bright Falls, but it's usually in the context of celebrity. I certainly don't fall into that category, but I'm sure we can all name YouTubers or other influencers who've struggled in the spotlight. Wake has had a hard time too. Barry makes a comment about a paparazzi incident when he arrives in town. Wake has made the mistake of self-medicating too. We see a severely hungover Alan during one of the game's flashbacks. I gotta say though, dude has a swanky apartment. A 3-bedroom in New York City, converted into 1 bedroom with 2 offices? That's living large. Between this luxury apartment and his talk show appearance, we get a good idea of the public perception of Wake, the pop culture figure as opposed to the actual man behind the books. People aren't necessarily concerned with what Wake feels on the inside, just what his books mean to them. I mean, the first Bright Falls resident we meet immediately tries to rope Wake into a radio interview.
Look, Mr. Maine, I'm on vacation. In fact, I'd appreciate it if we could keep my being here just between the two of us.
The medium of television seems to mock his celebrity status too. I've already mentioned how you can see strange CCTV footage of him at the writing desk, along with episodes of Night Springs. Every time an episode airs, that imposter syndrome rears its ugly head again. Wake wrote several scripts back then, but he can't even finish one measly novel now. What sort of celebrity writer is that? That late-night interview shows him at the top of his game. Where's that author now? Dr. Hartman's goal is to get Wake back to writing at any cost, and that involves some unconventional and highly unethical methods. They include sending his employee Ben Mott to do his dirty work. In this case, Mott pretends to have kidnapped Alice, demanding Wake's finished manuscript as a ransom. Is this a really unethical way to get Wake motivated to write? Yes. Does it feed into this idea of celebrity? Also yes. Hartman is an opportunist. He's more concerned with saying he worked with a celebrity like Alan Wake as opposed to actually curing him. The man behind the mental problems doesn't matter. Hartman just wants to use him for his own career, maybe as a follow-up to the creator's dilemma. There's a reason he appears in Control as a full-on twisted boss. For Wake, there's an external pressure of wanting to live up to the celebrity of his name, to match the expectations of everyday fans. Even worse, there are those out there who want to use his status for their own gain. Once again, we could all point to some internet names who've been in this same position, and it's a very unenviable one to be in.
I knew I should have gone to the cops. This wasn't the smartest thing I'd ever done, but I was still angry with Barry for trying to talk me out of it.
As if all that outside pressure wasn't tough enough, there's also a constant creative poke within Wake's own mind. His ongoing internal monologue prompts the player from time to time when needed, serves to illustrate the writerly way in which he sees the world, and also links back to everything we've talked about today. For many creative types, myself included, it's just not possible to shut off that valve. The flow is out of our control and it never stops. Even in the midst of writer's block, imposter syndrome, social wedges, and the pressure of success, big ideas and little nuggets of creativity trickle out on a never-ending basis.
I had to do something about the chain for the door to open.
As you've watched this video, perhaps you've had your own ideas, your own thoughts about what all these aspects of the game mean. The beauty of Alan Wake is that all of those interpretations are valid. My comparisons to content creation, your personal theories, or another thing entirely, they all work. You want to take the Silent Hill 2 route and start crafting dead wife theories? Go right ahead. That's what I love about art. Whatever meaning you project onto the piece is also true. There's a lot of meta-narrative going on in this game, but as we said at the beginning, you shouldn't get bogged down in quote-unquote what's really going on. Instead, think about what it all means to you. That goes for this video, my other videos, and all the games you're playing. I've used this time to talk about the struggles of creating videos in my own life, but I don't want to be pessimistic. I started this channel to bring positive vibes after all. So let me finish with this. If this video has inspired you in any way to create something of your own, go for it. Don't let your ideas just be ideas. Take the most basic gameplay mechanic of Alan Wake and use it as a metaphor for creativity in your own life. Look into the dark corners of your mind, bring your ideas to light, and execute them. Hey, thank you so much for watching this second spooky video of October. If you like what Framework is doing, definitely hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to see what we've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.